Hello, sports fans out there. Welcome to In the Bleachers, the sports show for the sports fan. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Rosen, and I'm coming to you live from Studio B here in Staten Island, New York at CTV. And this Monday, July 31st, 2017 edition. And tonight, you notice that I'm here by myself, but I'm not really here alone. And you know why? Because behind the booth is the legend himself, Mr. Jamie the Sportsman Hickson.
Hey guys, what's up? You're probably wondering exactly what's going on. I'm actually on the other side of the glass right now, double dipping. I've decided to be the director and the co-host for tonight. So Eric is going to be in front of the camera, and he's going to start us off right now.
That's right, folks. We got a lot, Jamie, to discuss in the world of sports, starting with some UFC action. This past weekend at UFC 214 and some of the other main event matchups, we had the light heavyweight match between Volkan Ozdemir and Jimmy Manua. Ozdemir won by KO punches in 42 seconds. In the welterweight matchup, Robbie Lawler, the Brawler, of course, defeated Donald Cerrone via unanimous decision in all three rounds. Then, for the first time ever, Cyborg, Christian Justino, and Tanya Evinger fought for the UFC Women's Featherweight Championship, and Justino won. That's right, Cyborg won in the third round with a TKO knees to the face at a minute 56. So she's a new featherweight champion. Isn't that crazy to see that?
It is crazy to see that, and probably the biggest matchup of the entire weekend was between a pair of big superstars, and I'm talking about John Jones,
Bones,
the man known as John Bones Jones, and Daniel Cormier. That has been talked about for quite a bit.
Yeah, DC and Bones fought each other for the second time, and just like the last time, the results weren't good for John Jones, but this time around, Jones came back with a huge head kick and punches on Cormier in the third round, 3 minutes and 1 second into it. And therefore, John Jones became the new UFC light heavyweight championship after a 2-year absence from the championship. This was a guy who was having personal at the octagon issues, if you will, but he's somewhat redeemed himself. And he even congratulated Daniel Cormier and said, what a well-done fight. In fact, the words that came from his mouth were, I want to thank Daniel Cormier for being my biggest rival and motivator. He has absolutely no reason to hang his head. He's been a model champion, a model husband, a model father, a teammate, a leader. And I aspire to be a lot more like that man because he's an amazing human being. Unfortunately, we were opponents, but outside of that, he's a true champion for the rest of his life. So he did make he made a conciliatory, nice speech towards Daniel out of respect for him. And you know what? Daniel did himself very well with this championship. But then what came after that comment was something that wasn't exactly conciliatory. This was an open challenge to Brock Lesnar. He called him out, and he wants a match.
Okay, first of all, he needs to really be careful what he wishes for because he just might get it. This is the beast, the animal who we're talking about here. A guy who has become a champion not only in WWE, but in the octagon as well. This is a guy you should not try to voluntarily pick a fight with because if you do, chances are you're going to get a beatdown.
There are several issues, though, with this fight. One, it's the 40-pound difference between the two of them. So the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship wouldn't be on the line, honestly, if they get this fight going on, let's say, in the next few months or so. So it would be a catch-weight fight, probably for a big pay-per-view event. They would have to probably wait till sometime later next if they can get this fight going. The other issue is Brock Lesnar is still with WWE at the moment. Currently, what I think is going to end up happening with him at SummerSlam is he'll be in a fatal four-way with Samoa Joe, Roman Reigns, and Braun Strowman, and probably lose the title, maybe to free him up for UFC. But even if that is the case, he still has the 2 suspensions that he incurred from the United States anti-doping agency that he has to go to a 6-month program for in order to get this suspension lifted. So there are a lot of issues and variables that have to be taken care of before this mega fight between Jones and Lesnar can take place.
Well, it's interesting that you mention that fatal four-way that's going to be going on, because there's going to be a precursor to this, I think, on Raw tonight, because there's going to be a triple threat going on. It's going to be Samoa Joe and Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman, and I think they're going to be squaring off against each other tonight on Raw.
Probably they're going to make it a number one contender, but honestly, they're making a mistake by doing that. It should be all four of them at Barclays Center. You can't think of a bigger match than those four in one ring, destroying each other for the championship.
Well, as far as that is concerned, anything can happen, but right now, I personally think this would be a really juicy precursor for a potential fatal four-way.
And even Dana White came out, the president of the UFC. He said, and I quote from Brock Lesnar from the Associated Press, "Be careful what you wish for, young man. You just might get it." And
this just goes to show you do not try and poke at a bear when he's trying to hibernate, because if you do, you're going to get torn to pieces.
But if you look at the two fighting styles, Jon Jones is quickness, speed, and accuracy, while Brock Lesnar is more of the he's more of a striker, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But Jon Jones, not only does he strike, but he strikes more with precision, and he's a lot quicker than Brock is. I honestly think in a fight, Jones has a chance probably better than any other person against Brock.
You really think so?
I really believe that. Now, let's go into some other stuff that went down, including the Staten Island Yankees baseball, that's gone on recently with them. And starting off last Monday, they had the Lowell Spinners. They lost 3-2 on a ground out in the top of the 12th inning by Marino Campana. Then on Tuesday, in one of their traditional camp day games, Jorge Guzman for the Staten Island Yankees strikes out 9 hitters over 6 innings, and Brian Triglav strikes out Yomar Valentin with the runner on first to end the game for his 5th save. And Dalton Blazer gets an RBI double, too, in this game. They win 2-1. They're off Wednesday. They go to Tri-City in Troy on Thursday, and what does Troy do on Thursday? A walk-off grand slam. They win 5-2. How insane is that? A walk-off grand slam home run.
It's the most exciting thing to happen in a game, hitting a grand slam home run. Speaking of which, did you hear about the grand slam home run that was hit by a kid on the Dodgers who was making his first major league at bat?
I heard about that yesterday. Yeah, it wasn't Kyle Seager. It's Kyle. Forgot the kid's name, but it sounded really fun. Anyway, Tri-City defeated the Staten Island Yankees on Friday 3-2 on another walk-off. And then Saturday, the Staten Island Yankees actually come back with a 2-0 3-pitcher combined no-hitter. And then yesterday, they beat Hudson Valley 1-0 they lose to Hudson Valley 1-0 on a walk-off in the 10th. So 3 times this week, the Staten Island Yankees lost on walk-offs. Coming up this week, they have Hudson Valley actually, as we speak right now at the park. They're in Hudson Valley on Tuesday. They play Aberdeen at home Wednesday to Friday. In fact, there's going to be some promotions Thursday, and Pride Night on Thursday. Friday is going to be Made in America military camouflage hats. And then Saturday at the ballpark, if you're lucky, get your tickets for Impact Wrestling with Bobby Lashley there.
And let me correct myself. It wasn't a grand slam home run. It was actually a 2-run double. And the kid in question is Kyle Farmer.
Farmer.
Yep, and it just so happened to be on national television last night against the Giants. He had bases loaded, 2 out in the 11th inning, and it was Kyle Farmer in his major league debut, mind you, that wound up getting that big hit. And things have been coming up really big for the Dodgers in the last couple of days, because today was the trading deadline, and the Dodgers came up with the biggest probably the biggest steal of the day just before the deadline.
Yeah, they acquired Yu Darvish, the starting pitcher from the Texas Rangers, who has not had a great successful year. If you look at his record, he's 6-9 with a 4.01 ERA. In the last 4 years alone, his wins have actually declined from 16 in 2012 to right now at 6 on the season. So it's, and the ERA has actually ticked up. And you have to take into account in 2015, he was out that entire year with Tommy John surgery, recovering from Tommy John surgery. So, maybe this time with the Dodgers organization and the fact that they also acquired Tony Watson, Tony Cingrani too, they're getting some pitching help and some relief help, the Dodgers, to make a big push.
You wonder if his Tommy John surgery has really played a part in the decline in numbers. I mean, he's gone from 16 to 13 to 10 to missing a whole year with the Tommy John to 7 and now 6. Of course, there's still 2 months of the season left over. So you figured now that the Dodgers have upgraded their pitching staff enormously, you figure that with a much better lineup that he's going to be working with, he's going to be getting a lot of support coming his way.
Oh, of course. When you got probably the NL Rookie of the Year winner in Cody Bellinger on that team.
Of course, Corey Seager as well.
Definitely Corey Seager. You still got Gonzo on the team, too, batting. So they have good players up and down that lineup, and they're leading the NL West by double digits at the moment. When, let's not forget, months ago, the Rockies were actually at the top of the division, and so were the Diamondbacks, too. But now the Dodgers have taken control of the NL West, as we always thought. But here's the thing I'm looking for. The day that their ace pitcher, Clayton Kershaw, gets back in the rotation. He still has back issues right now.
Yeah. It's really crucial for the Dodgers to get Kershaw back. You put him in there with Darvish, with Hyunjin Ryu, who's a very good pitcher in his own right. The Dodgers have a really dangerous trio that could potentially go a little bit further this postseason as opposed to last year when they got eliminated in the NLCS.
If they're all back together in the band playing the way they should be playing, they could have their first World Series championship since 1988. And
you figure with that addition, and also the fact that they wound up getting a really big addition to their bullpen, getting Tony Cingrani from the Reds. This has the potential to be a very serious run for the Dodgers this year.
And look at the Dodgers gave up, though, to get Darvish. They gave up their fourth best prospect in Willie Calhoun at second base, right-handed reliever A.J. Alexy, and shortstop Brandon Davis. So what they didn't, in fact, they were adamant they weren't going to give up right-handed pitcher Walker Buehler and Alex Verdugo, their two biggest prospects. So they said to the Rangers, we're not giving those guys up. You want anybody else? Sure. Just not those two individuals. As for another big trade that took place, the New York Yankees, we were hearing from yesterday in the afternoon until just hours ago, they made the trade officially completed with the Athletics for Sonny Gray.
And boy, did they give up a pretty penny to get this kid. Sonny Gray has already proven to be a very, very serviceable pitcher. But figure what the Yankees gave up. They gave up Dustin Fowler, who made his Major League debut and wound up mangling his knee all in the same night. Jorge Mateo, a shortstop and outfield prospect who they were really high on for about 3 or 4 years. And also James Kaprelian, who was a number 1 draft pick out of UCLA. He could have been groomed as a potential future starting pitcher for them. But now, the way the Yankees made this deal, they're seriously going to make a run at the Eastern Division title. They don't want just a wild card. They want that Eastern Division championship in the worst way. And there was also a side deal that they wound up making over the weekend, getting Jaime Garcia from the Twins.
For 2 minor league prospects as well.
Yep. And that was basically like a side move for them, something that they could get on the cheap. I mean, overall, he's had a rather respectable career. His best years were with the Cardinals, but right now he's going to be in a pressure cooker of the Bronx, and he's pitched in some pretty respectable playoff games in the past
for St. Louis,
for the Cardinals. Now let's see what he can do in the pressure cooker that is New York.
But you add him and Gray to a rotation that has CC Sabathia this year, Luis Severino, and Jordan Montgomery. They could really have the potential to do some good. Severino this year is having one of his best seasons in a long time, if you look at his numbers right here.
Yep. So you figure you've got two newcomers to go along with Sabathia and also Masahiro Tanaka, who wound up getting a really, really impressive start against
Tanaka,
Seattle
sorry.
over the weekend. You have the potential of a really solid quartet of pitchers going into August and September. And you mentioned Jordan Montgomery. Jordan has done all that the Yankees could have asked for from him. He's won 7 games for him this season. His only problem is he's been resorting to being a one-trick pony, where he's only been throwing nothing but fastballs, as opposed to using some of his other pitches in his arsenal. I mean,
Definitely.
he's got a pretty decent curve. He has a decent breaking ball, good slider. His fastball can top out at the high 90s, but if he's going to keep on falling in love with the fastball, then there's no sense in risking him being battered like he did against the Mariners yesterday.
Well, actually, he didn't play the Mariners. They played the Rays yesterday.
I mean, against the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, yesterday was not his finest moment. But did you see earlier this week? He against the Reds on Tuesday, he took a no-hitter into the 6th inning. He had one of his best performances on the season. So he really has a lot of potential to shine in this league, and he has some good off-speed pitches too as well. Now look at the other trade that took place too. Francisco Liriano going to yet another team. Remember, he was with the Twins. Then he got traded to Pittsburgh. Then he got sent to Toronto. Now his new destination, Houston. In exchange, the Astros gave up Nori Aoki and a minor league prospect in Teoscar Hernandez.
It's painfully obvious that the Astros are going to really go all in on this season. They already have the best record in the American League, and after the disappointment of missing the playoffs last year, they really want to build on the first 4 months of the season. A really good trade for the Astros, getting a veteran pitcher who's overall had a solid career for them.
And the Phillies were sellers too. They were big time. Jeremy Hellickson was traded off, and yesterday Joaquin Benoit was traded to their in-state rivals, the Pittsburgh Pirates.
And also, Howie Kendrick wound up being traded to the Nationals.
So, right, and that makes them even more dangerous than they already were, since they acquired those 2 relief pitchers from the Oakland Athletics, in Sean Doolittle and Ryan Madsen. Now you get another impact bat like Howie Kendrick, and they really have a dangerous lineup up and down. They already got a double-digit chokehold on the NL East. They're gonna tighten that grip now with Kendrick on the team. And when they get, say, Jason Worth, who looks like a cast member out of Roadhouse, back to the team, I know, funny I'm talking about his beard considering I got a goatee myself, but nonetheless, the guy Jason Worth is amazing. You get him back at full strength, and the rest of those players, whew.
Yeah.
Watch out for the Nationals.
Well, we would be remiss if we did not mention what's going on with the Mets right now. Of course, the biggest news that they made was the fact that they traded away Addison Reed to the Red Sox. But it was basically a swap of pitching for pitching. They wound up getting 3 prospects coming back in the deal. When you think about it, the Mets did exactly what they were supposed to do, which was trade away their best asset and try and get something back from them. For the record, the 3 prospects that they got from the Red Sox, Steven Nogosek, Jamie Callahan, and Gerson Bautista, who are ranked 18th, 23rd, and 28th in the Red Sox minor league farm system, respectively.
And you got a bunch of 20-year-olds. Callahan's 23. He had a 5-2 record, 3.21 ERA, and 2 stops. He's currently with the AAA Pawtucket team. Then you got Nagasek, 22-year-old. He's a reliever. He's actually right now at Salem, which is their advanced Class A affiliate in the Carolina League. And then you got Batista, 23, also at Salem, 3-2 record, 5.16 ERA, 4 saves. So they're probably going to, 2 of them, I would say, are going to be going to either Brooklyn, possibly AAA Las Vegas.
And this is where the other trade comes in for the Mets, because they also got A.J. Ramos from the Florida Marlins, well, the Miami Marlins now. So now that Reed's going to be going to Boston, you figure on the slim chance that Jody Familia is going to be returning sometime next month, or
Doubtful.
maybe in September. They could probably have Familia back as their closer, and up until then, probably do a closer by committee. Maybe go with Ramos, or possibly go with somebody like, let's say, Hansel Robles, maybe. One thing is for certain, Fernando Salas has got to go. He has been an absolute train wreck in that bullpen this season, and it's just a matter of time before he gets his walking papers.
Most of this bullpen is a complete, utter mess, I'll be honest. That needs reworking. But as for the other trade that took place, how about Lucas Duda being traded to the Tampa Bay Rays?
Yeah, that was another big trade that the Mets made, going to Tampa, and he already made an impact with his new team because he hit 2 home runs in the Yankee series.
Which is something, considering what he did. But speaking of the Mets this past week, they start off in San Diego last Monday, and Jacob deGrom gets his 8th straight victory. And that's the first time that a Met has done that since Bobby Jones in 1997 to win 8 straight starts. He gave up only 2 runs, struck out 8, and they end up winning the game 5-3. Addison Reed, actually, who played at San Diego State, one of his last days with the Mets, got his 17th save in that game. Then we go to Tuesday's game against San Diego. Yoenis Cespedes gets what they call a Little League home run on an error by Will Myers, who threw in the wrong direction, and Cespedes was able to go around the bases for a huge run in the 7th inning, and they end up winning 6-5. And then Wednesday, the Mets, unfortunately get rocked by Luis Torrens' 3 RBIs and Manuel Margot's home runs, and they lose 6-3. Then Thursday, the Mets lose 7-5. Manuel Margot, a triple, shy of the cycle, and the Padres win 7-5.
And then came that disaster of a weekend in Seattle. They get swept of 3 games by the Mariners.
Actually, they won Friday 7-5. Conforto had those 2 home runs. They did win on Friday night.
Here we go. So the Mets did win on Friday. My mistake. But then there was the disaster of Saturday and Sunday. Yesterday was really, really bad. And lost in this whole thing, in addition to all the trades that the Mets made, is the fact that they're finally going to dip into their farm system and bring up Ahmed Rosario to be the shortstop starting tomorrow. And this could be the first of maybe a couple more moves that the Mets make involving their system. Don't be surprised if you see Dominic Smith get called up to be the first baseman.
It's not only that. How about the best thing that took place this weekend in baseball? 2 things yesterday. One, congratulations to Adrian Beltre on a 4th inning double, became the 31st player in Major League history to have 3,000 hits, and the first ever Dominican-born player to do that.
This guy has been such an outstanding player for almost 2 decades. Keep in mind, he actually started his career as a Dodger in 1998. He was a Dodger for 7 years. And then he wound up bouncing around, doing 5 years in Seattle, did a year in Boston, and now he's in his 6th season playing for the Texas Rangers. He's had an outstanding career.
20 years in the league.
20 years in the league. He's also a 400 home run guy. Don't be surprised if this guy becomes a Hall of Famer once he retires. I mean, he's had a tremendous career, but in many ways, it's kind of sort of been under the radar since his Dodger days because he's played in Texas and Seattle where he didn't really get that much clout attention-wise.
I don't know about that. There are times where teams, when they wanted to make trades for a player, Adrian Beltre was always on the top of everybody's wish list, but unfortunately, Texas probably wanted huge prospects to get in return for a guy like Beltre. But if you look at this, he became only the third baseman to ever make it to 3,000 hits. The other 2 Hall of Famers, George Brett, Kansas City Royals, and Wade Boggs, who played with numerous teams.
Yep, the Red Sox, Yankees, and Rays.
So isn't that something right there? So usually when you get to 3,000 hits, it automatically qualifies most people to get into the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And I think when all is said and done with his career, Beltre will be a Hall of Famer after 5 years whenever he retires. And he has over 1,100 hits with the Rangers. Isn't that something right there?
Funny that we mentioned the Hall of Fame because the induction ceremonies took place over the weekend, and they welcomed a brand new class. They welcomed Ivan Rodriguez, also the commissioner, Bud Selig, as well as Tim Raines and Jeff Bagwell.
Well, look at Jeff Bagwell. It took him 17 times to finally get in with 86.2%. Played all of his career from 91 to 05 with the Astros organization. A lifetime .297 average hitter. Over 2,300 hits. Nearly 450 home runs. Over 1,500 ribbies. 4 All-Star appearances. An NL MVP. The Rookie of the Year in 91. A Gold Glove winner. A Silver Slugger 3 times. The NL RBI leader in 94. This was a Connecticut-born player who played for the University of Hartford, originally drafted by the Red Sox in '89, traded by the Red Sox to the Astros for Larry Anderson, one of the worst, most lopsided trades you can ever remember.
This was one of the few times where Lady Luck was on the side of the Houston Astros because he became basically their close. He was probably as close to being a franchise player as you could get on any team.
Without a doubt. And you know what? With him, Craig Biggio and Lance Berkman, they formed what was known as the Killer Bees. This was a team that, when he was with the Astros, the NL Central, they were first and second in 11 out of 12 years with 6 playoff appearances. Mm-hmm. It's just unbelievable. And he did get to the World Series. Unfortunately, in 05, they lost to the White Sox.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Astros had a lot of good teams in the past. Unfortunately, that 2004 team, they were not able to get past the Cardinals for the pennant. And then 2005, they just ran into this White Sox team that was basically like a team of destiny.
And you know what? He's had 6 times in his career, he's batted over 300, which is something to say. And he's the only player in MLB history with 6 straight years with each of 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, 100 runs, and 100 walks.
You mentioned before how many times it took for him to wait to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. A couple of things worked against him.
Actually, 7 times. Sorry, not 17.
7 times he got passed over for the Hall of Fame before he finally made it. There were a couple of things that worked in his favor. Number one, he was a medical liability. He had a lot of injuries in his career. And number 2, unfortunately, he kind of got caught up in the entire steroid thing that wound up taking place in the better part of the 2000s. But fortunately for him, he was finally able to get that call, and more power to him.
And he gets inducted as an Astro. Speaking of a player that got inducted, Tim Raines, of course, 10th ballot for him, 86%. He played most of his career with the with the Expos from 79 to 90, 7 All-Star appearances, 3 World Series, 2 of which as a player in 96 and 98 with the Yankees, and as a coach in 05 with the White Sox organization. Mm-hmm. A Silver Slugger in 86, the batting championship for the National League in 86, 4 times as a stolen base leader from 81 to 84. One of the best stolen base players, 808 stolen bases, 980 ribbies, 170 home runs, over 2,600 hits, and nearly 300 he batted.
He was the quintessential table setter for the Expos and the White Sox and the Yankees, and for a couple of other teams as well.
Marlins, Orioles.
Yeah, played
Athletics.
for his hometown Marlins for a short time, and also for the Orioles. Also played for the A's. This was a guy who played on so many solid teams on the Expos when he was there first off with Gary Carter and also with Andre Dawson. They had so many good players at that time. Unfortunately, the Expos were just not able to get over the hump during the decade of the 80s when he was there, but he had a marvelous career. A great base stealer, a really good contact hitter. Unfortunately, he was caught up in a little bit of a scandal in the late 70s and early 80s because he wound up getting implicated in the cocaine scandal that really rocked Major League Baseball in the 80s. But fortunately, he was able to bounce back from it, and he had a wonderful career. I
know. He got himself cleaned up, and now, he got himself inducted. He's turned his life around, and, I was happy for him to get in. How about Ivan Pudge Rodriguez? First ballot Hall of Famer with 76%, because in the Hall of Fame, you need the required 75% votes from the baseball writers to get in. He got in by just 1% over. And as a Ranger from 91-02, 14 All-Star appearances, World Series champion 03 with the Marlins organization, the AL MVP 99, the NLCS MVP in 03 in the series against the Cubs, the infamous Steve Bartman series, the 13 Gold Gloves he's won, and 7 times as a Silver Slugger, best defensive catcher.
One of the greatest defensive catchers and also one of the greatest slugging catchers of his generation. Hit for power, hit for average, and also very quick for a catcher. I mean, pardon the pun, but you usually don't associate speed with catchers in baseball, but he was one of the few catchers who was very, very athletic in his time.
And you know what? If you look at his record for guys who tried to steal bases, he has a record 45.68% of people caught stealing.
That's just unheard of. I mean, for him to come close to being the catcher who threw out half of the base runners that tried to steal against him, that just goes to show you, 1, how accurate of an arm he has, and 2, how strong of an arm he has.
And here's another little tidbit for you guys. He surpassed the great Carlton Fisk for the most games catched, June 17th of 2009. That was his 2,227th game on his knees catching. That's one of the toughest positions to play catcher because you're constantly on your knees. It could be great weather, it could be terrible weather. It doesn't matter. But the fact that you got to be on your knees, on your toes, and you got to be concentrating on the entire field, what's going on, all the time, I give catchers so much credit. That's why they make great managers in baseball, because they see the game.
That's why you see Mike Scioscia lasting in the game for 18 years with the Angels. That's why Joe Girardi has lasted 10 years as manager of the Yankees, because they see all, and they're probably the best taker of someone's temperature when the game is on the line.
And then Bud Selig, the 9th MLB commissioner of Major League Baseball, was inducted yesterday. He was there. He was even the acting commissioner from 92 to 98, before he became the official commissioner in 98. This was the guy who handled the 98 strike, the wild card he introduced, interleague play in 97, the merging of the AL and NL commissioner's office into one office, the World Baseball Classic, revenue sharing, the fact that you had the Milwaukee Brewers move from the American League to the National League and the Astros from the National League to the American League he supervised. He was part of so many major events, and one of the darkest clouds of his tenure was the Mitchell Report that he commissioned.
Yeah, I have a real problem with Selig going in, and you mentioned something really, really important, and that's the Mitchell Report. That occurred under his watch. And still, even in spite of all of the names that were mentioned in that report, what about the names of the guys that did not make the list, that should have been on that list? That means those guys wound up beating the system some way, somehow. There's also the matter of the All-Star game, which wound up ending in a tie. There's also the matter of so many other things that were under his watch. I just have a hard time calling him a Hall of Famer. Sorry.
Well, you know what? He did create the second wild card. You got to give him that at least. He at least created another wild card to make it interesting for the playoffs, especially to give other teams a chance to win the World Series. He did, he did a lot of good, but there are some things that were not so great under his tenure. So it's 50-50 depending on who you talk to. But I think he did deserve to get into the Hall of Fame for some of the innovative things that he has done for baseball. But John Schuerholz, a guy who's won 2 World Series as a front office guy with both the Royals in 85 and the Braves in 95, and helped his teams win divisions 16 combined times. That's something. And was the guy who brought in Chipper Jones and George Brett.
If you want to look for a model on how to build a playoff contending team or a championship team, look at John Schuerholz. What he did building the Royals and the Braves just epitomizes the kind of career that an executive for a Major League Baseball team or any professional sports team should have.
And then the J.G. Taylor Spink Award, that's given to sports writers, given to Claire Smith, who right now currently works at ESPN as a news editor for remote production. Became the first African-American woman or woman of any ethnicity to cover Major League newspaper for a newspaper. Covered the Yankees for the Hartford Courant back in 1983. Was working with the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer. So a well-deserved honor for an incredible lady. So I'm so happy for her.
That's a really landmark moment for the game. Inducting the first woman reporter into the Hall. I mean, it takes someone with a lot of commitment, a lot of sacrifice, and also a lot of guts in order to blaze a lot of trails in that sport.
And then for the best broadcaster, they call it the Ford C. Frick, Bill King.
Yep.
Legendary in the Bay Area.
Bill King, of course, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's the voice of the Oakland Athletics, correct?
He was with them, but he also the San Francisco Giants.
Mm-hmm.
He's done several sports teams. This is a guy who had Holy Toledo was his catchphrase.
Mm-hmm.
So he was and then the Buck O'Neil Lifetime Achievement Award couldn't have been given to a nicer, kinder, sweet, and courageous human being like Rachel Robinson.
Yes.
Who, along with her legendary husband, the late, great Jackie Robinson, created the Jackie Robinson Foundation that has given scholarships to underprivileged youth and to minorities to pursue their dreams of going to college.
You know, even with Jackie's passing, which is coming up on 25 years this October.
I can't believe that.
Rachel has done so much, not just for baseball, but so much for the African-American community. What she has done for the youth for the African American youth of our country, really shows you how much class and grace and courage under pressure she's had.
No, I'm sorry. It gets me emotional to think about the work that she's done, and you know what, the strength that she was for Jackie, especially during the hard times when he played in his first season. Mm-hmm. When you think about it, 1947, and just what he had to go through. You know, all the tirades and things that were thrown at Jackie's way, but yet Rachel stood by Jackie and was his strength and courage through everything he went through in his first Major League season, and look what has blossomed into.
By the way, let me correct myself. It's actually 45 years since Jackie Robinson passed away. It'll be 45 years this coming October.
Speaking of Hall of Fames, this coming Saturday is another Hall of Fame. In another place called Canton, Ohio. That's right. The NFL Football Hall of Fame ceremony will take place. And before that, on Thursday, watch live, 8 o'clock NBC, as the Arizona Cardinals take on the Dallas Cowboys in the annual Hall of Fame game. So definitely check that out on Thursday, 8 o'clock NBC. But Saturday on the NFL Network, check out the Hall of Fame ceremony with 7 amazing inductees, starting with the legendary kicker, the Great Dane, Morton Anderson.
I was fortunate enough to see Morton Anderson going back to the early 80s. He was more than just a kicker with a strong leg. He was probably one of the most accurate kickers that any team could have. A really long career with the Saints and the Vikings and the Giants and the Falcons. A guy who won so many games with so many big kicks. This is a guy who definitely was deserving of making it to the Hall. Without
a doubt. Congratulations to him. And then we got Terrell Davis, who, of course, will go in. By the way, Morton will go in as a Saint for 82 to 84 those years. But Terrell Davis, a lifetime Bronco from 95 to 01, two consecutive Super Bowl appearances and victories in Super Bowls 32 and 33. In fact, he had over 7,600 rushing yards in his career. And in Super Bowl 32, he had the record for most rushing touchdowns in a single game. 3 rushing touchdowns to accompany his 150-yard, 3-yard performance. He still could have played more, but he had the issues with his knees. But I'm very happy for Terrell to get this prestigious honor.
Me too. When you think about it, it's a little bit of a surprise that he wound up getting in, considering the fact his career got cut short because he wound up mangling both of his knees. But what he did for 4 full seasons playing for the Broncos really shows you what kind of potential he had if he had not hurt either of his knees. I mean, he was a great pass-catching receiver, a good power running back as well.
North-south all the way.
A north-south guy who came up big in the biggest playoff games. I mean, notice what he did in the Super Bowl against the Falcons when they played in Miami. I think he single-handedly won that game with those 180 yards rushing that he had.
And then you look at Kenny Easley, another Seahawk from 81 to 87, had 32 interceptions in his career, 5 Pro Bowl appearances, and Defensive Player of the Year in 84. And then
another guy who really surprised me when he wound up getting picked, because his career was shortened to just 7 seasons, but one of the best cover guys and also one of the best readers of quarterbacks in his generation.
And unfortunately, he came down with kidney disease and all that, and that shortened his career. But right now he's still alive and kicking. He's fought, through all the adversities he's had. So congratulations to Kenny. Now Jerry Jones, who's the owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, a guy who bought the team for $140 million, turned it into the $4.2 billion enterprise that it is today, on top of which really created the revenue sharing that we see in the NFL, the TV marketing deals. Basically, without Jerry Jones, the NFL today wouldn't be where it is. And I know some people will disagree with that, but there are a lot of owners who thank Jerry Jones for some of the innovative things he brought to the game.
Such as?
Well, like I said, revenue sharing, entertainment value, bringing Fox onto the board, to cover the NFC games, really really growing the business of the NFL into the $13 billion industry that it is today. But there are some people who think that he's being a bit greedy as judge, jury, and execution of the Cowboys. But at the same time, this is the guy that is not going to give control. The 1 year he did was when there was Johnny Manziel that could have been picked by the Cowboys, but he listened to his son and went with Zach Martin. Good decision.
Well, probably not picking Manziel was a good decision, but as far as Zach Martin is concerned, the jury's still out on him.
Oh, he's one of the best offensive linemen.
He's only had 2 or 3 good seasons. I mean,
he's part of that great trio that they have on the left side and on the center and the left guard. Believe me, they have one of the best O-lines. That's why, in fact, Zeke Elliott had one of his best seasons in his first year, over 1,600 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns.
Granted, he's played well, but again, he's only had 3 years in the game. I think we should reserve judgment until he's played a little bit more extensively.
I disagree, but okay. But Jerry Jones also brought the 3 Super Bowls with the deals that he made, especially with Herschel Walker. One of the craziest deals you could ever imagine taking place.
There was an interesting 30 for 30 short about that trade. Basically, what happened was the Cowboys wound up trading Herschel Walker to the Vikings for a bunch of players. I think it was maybe it was a 4-for-1 deal, and the catch was the Cowboys were supposed to be getting back draft picks if none of the players would be on the roster the following season. And as it turns out, none of the players survived the following season. And what happens?
Draft picks came to the Cowboys.
And who did those draft picks turn into? They turned into Jay Novacek, Troy Aikman, and Emmitt Smith.
And look what that's done for the organization. 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. With those guys together, if you look at, especially 2 of them against Buffalo, and of course the 1 Super Bowl 30 victory against the Pittsburgh Steelers, those were huge dividends that paid off with that Herschel Walker deal. Then you got Jason Taylor. Yeah, some people will know him for his stint on Dancing with the Stars, but for NFL fans, they know him for his time as a Miami Dolphin and the 139.5 sacks he had in his career, 7th all time, one of the greatest sack artists.
One of the greatest pass rushers in his generation, a guy with quickness, a guy with a great ability, a keen ability to try and get to the quarterback. A lot of people know, I remember him as a real sack machine and a major jet killer, too, because he had a lot of his best games against the Jets.
Thanks for the reminder.
Unfortunately, he didn't play in that many playoff games because, quite frankly, he didn't really get that much support, either on his side of the ball or on on the offensive side of the ball either, because he wound up playing at a time when Dan Marino was basically in the twilight of his career.
That's right. And what about the last two players right here? LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the greatest pass-catching running backs in NFL history.
Just a dynamic player with the Chargers and the Jets. I remember him for his best days in San Diego. And you mentioned it. He was a supreme pass catcher out of the backfield. Great quickness. Deceptively good power too, but mostly known for his quickness and for his pass catching ability.
And then one of the greatest stories, a man who went to 3 Super Bowl appearances with 2 teams and won Super Bowl 34 with the St. Louis Rams. I'm talking about Kurt Warner, who currently is an analyst with the NFL Network, finally got his rightful place in the annals of Canton, Ohio. Thank goodness a good man like Kurt Warner gets in.
It was just a matter of time before he was going to get in. It wasn't a matter of if anymore. It was a matter of when, and it just so happened to be this year. But think about the dues that he had to pay in order to get that far. Yep. Went to Northern Iowa, never even drafted, wound up bagging groceries in his home state of Iowa.
That's right.
Wound up playing 3 years of arena ball, played in NFL Europe, had a cup of coffee with the Packers, but then had his best years with the Rams, where he led the greatest show on turf, played in a couple of Super Bowls with them.
Marshall Faulk.
Had Marshall Faulk and Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt.
Yep.
And so many great weapons on the offensive side of the ball.
And they were part of the 1 yard game, Super Bowl 34, which they won 23-16.
You could argue they probably could have won the Super Bowl against the Patriots if they hadn't have fallen behind in such a deep hole in the first half.
Super Bowl 36, that's right. They lost by the game-winning field goal of Adam Vinatieri's foot.
Then had a cup of coffee with the Giants, where he started the first half of 2004 and then gave way to Eli Manning, and then spent the last 5 years of his career playing for the Cardinals, a team that was basically a laughingstock when he got there. And what happens? He takes them to a pair of playoff appearances in a row, one of which was a Super Bowl appearance, a Super Bowl which, quite frankly, I thought that they should have won, but Ben Roethlisberger engineered a comeback for the ages with that drive against the Cardinal defense, and it wound up resulting in Santonio Holmes catching the game-winning touchdown.
It wasn't even just that. How about the Marvin Harrison interception that took place? Mm-hmm. That really, the Harrison, not Marvin.
James Harrison pick six.
Yeah, the James Harrison 95-yard pick six that took place. That hurt. That didn't help either. But the Santonio Holmes touchdown with 2 of his feet just barely in. I mean, if you watch the video, they were tippy toes on the end zone, and he made a complete catch. But still, Kurt Warner had a great career. In fact, in the first Super Bowl, he had over 340 yards in that game. So it's just, I'm happy for him, happy for all 7 of these individuals. So watch on Saturday for the ceremony, watch Thursday for the Hall of Fame. Speaking of which, the fact that we're talking about the Hall of Fame ceremony, we're talking about the game itself, that means only one thing.
Football's here.
That's right. And we're hearing a lot of news going around the league. Right now, we're hearing about Donald Penn. He's holding out. He wants a new contract from the Oakland Raiders. Since they gave an extension to Derek Carr, he wants his share.
Yeah, it really doesn't surprise me when you think about it. But you mentioned something that was really important, and that's the fact that every single number 1 draft pick has officially been signed, sealed, and delivered, which means they can get ready for training camp, they can get ready for the preseason games, and they should be up and ready for the regular season when it starts the second weekend of September.
Yes, definitely. And how about this? Yeah, Aaron Donald, Donald Penn, they're the ones that are holding out that won new contracts. Aaron Donald, of course, playing for the Rams defense. All contracts have been signed. Corey Davis, of course, was the remaining holdout, but signed his deal with the Tennessee Titans on his 4-year rookie contract. Congratulations to him. I can't wait to see what he does. Then we heard Andrew Luck right now with his offensive line. Hopefully they will protect him because he's going to be needed in the worst way for this team. Rob Ninkovich has called it a career after 11 years with the New England Patriots in the NFL.
Yeah, and probably two of the biggest stories that are going on in the NFL right now. One involves Ben Roethlisberger because there have been a lot of questions surrounding his future. Ben Roethlisberger is suddenly considering retiring after this season, and he said that CTE would play a role in his decision.
Well, it did play in another decision with another player this past week as well. And then Xavier Rhodes, the cornerback that came out of Florida State in 2013 for the Vikings, who had 5 interceptions last year for the Vikings, signed a new 5-year, $70 million extension. He's got great physicality and speed to work in Mike Zimmer's aggressive style defense. So congratulations to him. The Seahawks and the Chiefs swapped linebackers. DJ Alexander went to the Seahawks, and Kevin Pierre-Louis went to the Chiefs. And speaking of another trade, the Bills traded their quarterback, Cardale Jones, who's really fourth on the depth chart for the Bills, to the Chargers for conditional draft picks.
And the other story in regards to the NFL surrounds Colin Kaepernick. As we all know, the guy has had a tough time trying to find a job. We thought for sure that the Baltimore Ravens would be able to accommodate him. But now I'm hearing that maybe the Ravens are getting cold feet in wanting to bring this guy into their camp.
Oh, yes. I see where both sides are coming from people's perspectives across the entire country about how they feel towards Colin Kaepernick. One side feels as though what he did on the field, bending the knee during the national anthem ceremony, in their mind, from their perspective, and I know there are people who disagree, from their perspective, that it's a disparaging display of ignorance towards towards soldiers who are putting their lives on the line and towards his country. While from the other perspective, what Colin Kaepernick feels he's doing, he is standing up for an issue that not many people want to talk about, that not many people want to fight for, and that's injustice in his mind. And he feels by doing this peacefully is a way to bring about people talking about this and getting a conversation going that could lead to change for certain situations. So I try to see it from where both perspectives are coming from.
I just shake my head when I see stuff like this going on. You know what certain people's problems are? They think that just because they're hearing a person when they talk, they think that they're listening to them. No, they're not listening to them at all. I see a guy like Greg Hardy still working, even though
he's not working anymore.
Well, I saw Greg Hardy actually hold a job for a little bit with the Cowboys, even though he nearly beat his girlfriend to death.
That's true.
And I also saw or heard about Adrian Peterson beating his son with a stick. And he still wound up
he's with the Saints,
finding his way back into the NFL. Now he's gone from Minnesota to New Orleans. Yet Colin Kaepernick, all because he wanted to protest the racial injustices that are going on in this country, and he can't so much as even get himself an invite to a camp. What part of the words racial injustice do people not understand? He never, ever spoke about protesting against the soldiers. He spoke about racial injustice.
That may be the case, but to most Americans, when they see that, that's what they feel. That's the emotions that are emitted in their eyes and from their perspective and their mindset, that what he does during the national anthem is disrespectful. But at the same time, he is protesting an issue that he feels strongly about, while there are players who have had questionable histories in the past get jobs in the NFL and get signed, like Greg Hardy, like Michael Vick, who ran dogfights and yet had a 2-year prison sentence and was still able to find work afterwards. So
I remember many years ago, about 20 years ago, there was a guy in the NBA, Chris Jackson, who converted to Islam and changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. He raised a similar firestorm when he refused to stand for the national anthem because he claimed that it was against his religion. Well, as it turns out, there was a compromise. He stood for the national anthem, yet he wound up saying a silent Muslim prayer where he took his hands close to his face like this and wound up saying a silent prayer. No one, even after people raised a stinker about that, there was still a little bit of compromise. Do you know Mahmoud Abdul Rauf is still playing today? He's playing semi-pro ball now. He's still making silent prayers on the sidelines during the national anthem. Why can't we all just put this thing aside? Just forget about the guy's scruples and just give him a break for once.
Well, some people do accuse the NFL of a double standard, but at the same time, there are a lot of teams that are beholden to the almighty dollar. And when they see it, when the majority of fans dislike Colin Kaepernick, it's not good business to have a guy that most people dislike on your team. Because if you have him on your team, you lose sales in terms of tickets, food, TV ratings could possibly go down. People may not want to watch games out of spite or out of some mixed feeling of disgust towards him. So they do not want to rock the boat and have financial burdens. But at the same time, at least, this is a guy who not only talks about injustice, but tries to do something about injustice from his perspective. He not only gives money towards organizations, he gets involved in the community too. But yet at the same time, there are people who still dislike the fact that, yes, he bended his knee during the national anthem. So that's why teams, from a financial business perspective, are not going to have a guy like that on their team because they do not want fans to be turned off and not want to watch or go to games.
Will they be saying the same thing if Kaepernick hooked up with a club and suddenly started leading them to some victories? Are they going to be saying the same thing then?
I don't know, but right now there are fans who want nothing more than to burn Kaepernick's jersey than actually wear his jersey at the moment. But if he does get victories, if he's given an opportunity by a team, which won't be right now with the Ravens, or who knows if any team will pick him up, but if he is given a chance to get his career back where it should be, then you know what? I think people might change their attitude. We got about 2 minutes left, so let me give you some quick news out there. Kyle Busch won yesterday in the Poconos for the Monster Energy Race Car Series. Jonathan Vegas defended successfully his RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, Canadian Open Championship with a birdie on the first hole of a playoff against Charlie Hoffman. And the Cavaliers signed Derrick Rose to a one-year, $2.1 veteran minimum deal of $2.1 million. How about that? Derrick Rose with the Cavaliers.
And while that's going on, there's still the issue of Kyrie Irving and where he's going to go. Is he going to go to the Knicks? Is he going to go to the Heat? Is he going to go to the Spurs? Or is he going to go to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is the other team that he would accept a trade to?
I think I've heard him say, I want to badly go to the New York Knicks. I never heard anybody in the last 10 years ever admit such words like Knicks and very badly I want to go there. Usually it's like, Knicks, I want to very badly stay away from, like, the plague.
Well, something tells me this is going to be dragging on for quite a while. The Cavaliers owner has already said that he expects Irving to be in training camp, but that's just a matter of words. There's also something in regards to Carmelo Anthony. Is he going to be traded to the Rockets, or is he going to remain a Knick for the foreseeable future?
Oh, man, that will be one of the most painful marriages if Melo is still with the Knicks, considering Melo hates the Knicks and doesn't want to have anything to do with them now, and the Knicks mutually feel the same way. So a deal will be made. It's in terms of the contract situation with him and players that we get in return for Melo. As for the other issues, we're here. LeVar Ball, of course, the hits keep coming on with him with comments about female referees. This guy just can never stop.
And he also pulled his AAU team off the court to protest a call.
Like, that is just incredibly arrogant, stupid. But you know what? We don't have much time to get into LeVar Ball's stupidity. Anyway, thank you all for joining us for this special edition of In the Bleachers. the man from the booth, Jamie the Sportsman Hickson. You did a great job tonight, as always. Thank you, Staten Island. I'm Eric Rosen. We'll see you next Monday, August 7th, for another episode of In the Bleachers here on CTV. Good night, Staten Island.